So again, my name is Amy Acalino. I'm here from Intel Corporation. I'm the Director of Open Source Embedded Software Engineering, and I'll be moderating the panel. And then the panelists are Anas, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Anas Nasser from Intel.
And then Carlos.
So Carlos Kufi from Nordic Semiconductor.
Thanks, Carlos. Keith?
Yeah, I'm Keith Short from Google.
Maureen?
Maureen Helm from NXP.
Mazen?
I am Mazen Gideon from Intel as well.
And then Michael.
Michael Gilda, Ant Micro.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, and then Kate, can you introduce yourself and then take us through?
Sure. I'm Kate Stewart from the Linux Foundation, and want to thank Amy and the panelists for helping us with this last keynote session. I'd also like to take this chance to quickly thank all of our project members who've actually made this event possible. Being able to put this type of event on would not be possible without the support from our governing board and our various membership. So thank you to them, and please feel free to reach out and thank them directly. And I'd also like to make a special thank you to our program committee for this conference for helping us to curate the content and then help manage the various sessions. Anas, Carls, Johan, Keith, Maureen, Olaf, all helped pull together the content and get it organized so that we hope you've had a useful first ever developer summit. And also I'd like to thank Kumar Gala, who stepped in last minute to help us host this week after he finished putting the release out last week. Otherwise he would have been pulled into the reviews. And then this event would not have been possible without the support of all the speakers putting their content together and making it available and presenting. So I would like to say thank you to everyone who's done this, done the speaking and putting content up and so forth. And if you haven't sent the slides in yet, please send your slides into Brett and we'll link them up so that others can refer to it. Just a few stats about this event. Over 2/3 probably, or pretty close to 2/3 of the people that have shown up and registered for the event are actually new to Zephyr, been here less than a year. And then about 7% have been here over 3 years. And about a quarter is 1 to 3 year period. So we've attracted a lot of new people and hopefully they'll found this event useful. We had 3 sessions. We had 5 mini conferences and 28 individual sessions as part of this event, and there were 51 presenters. So that's sort of the stats that we've got to this point. We'll probably be trying to figure out more things. The one thing you can do to help, if you're watching this, is help us improve this developer summit next time. We want to get your feedback from this one, especially since it's a first. So there's a very short URL there. And if you could fill it in, it should only take a minute or 2. It's just a few questions. And just give us that feedback. We'll definitely be paying attention to it as we try to plan out for next year. So with that, I will say thank you again and turn it over to Amy.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Brett. I look forward to many, many more years of this developer summit for the Zephyr project growing. Okay, so welcome to our panel. I'm going to do some prepared questions that we worked on, and then I will ask Robin to give me a question from the audience. So to start, and Maureen, I'm going to call on you first. Maureen, I'd like you to talk a little bit about the successes with commercializing firmware based on Zephyr that you have experienced either at NXP or elsewhere within the open source project.
So yeah, thank you, Amy. I'd say, it's amazing how much this project has grown since we started in the, 5 years ago. It's really cool to see, in the last couple of years now that we have customers that are using Zephyr on our silicon out in products. And I think one of the things that has been especially remarkable about this community is the fact that we're actually collaborating together with our customers in the context of this project. And so I think that has gone a long way towards creating a better product overall, right? We're getting early feedback from customers as we're building things, rather than building something internally, throwing over the fence, and then having the customer say, "Oh, well, it would have been nice if you'd done it this way instead." So I think that's been one of the amazing things about sort of how we've been running this project over the last few years.
Awesome, Maureen. And do you have anything specific that you've learned at NXP?
Anything specific? I think that's a big question, right? We've learned a lot of things along the way, right? I think that at least from our perspective, this project has been pretty different from what we've maybe been used to in the past. I mean, when we have SoCs that run Linux and things like that, people are familiar with that. But a lot of side of the microcontroller side of things, open source is maybe a little less familiar. And so I think working with customers that are coming from kind of a bare metal perspective, going up to an RTOS is, some of them are familiar with other RTOSs, but I think many of them, Zephyr there's a lot of new things that they had to encounter, things like K-configs and device trees and complicated build systems and CMakes, and it's I think that's sort of a whole nother level that we had to work on and educate people on.
Is there anyone else on the panel that would like to comment on the successes with commercializing firmware?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about Google's effort. Right, we're in the process of moving our embedded controller firmware that's used on Chromebooks over to Zephyr. This is ongoing, so we haven't shipped this yet, but I did want to talk to why we chose Zephyr as the RTOS that we switched to. And for Google, it was the neutral governance of the Zephyr community that was really kind of the driving factor for us. What we see out of that neutral governance is it lessens the risks for the chip vendors to support Chromebooks, because now the code drivers that they write don't have to target just Chromebooks, right? It can be used for other applications. It's opened up to a larger community. And we've already seen some success with this. We've had some really great engagement from some EC chip vendors like Nuvoton, ITE, Microchip have now been very active at adding support for their chipsets into Zephyr. And then we've been integrating and testing that within the Chromebook environment. And then the last thing I would say that helped us pick Zephyr was Zephyr's commitment to security, both in just how the foundation, the foundation of Zephyr was security, and there's just the ongoing commitment to make sure that it's going to be a secure and auditable code base.
Indeed.
Awesome. Thank you, Keith. That was fantastic. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next topic. And Anas, just as a heads up, I'm going to call on you first. So Anas, can you cover some challenges that you have found with commercializing firmware based on Zephyr, either at Intel or within the open source community?
Oh, you're on mute.
You're muted, Anas.
One more time.
Yes, sorry. Okay. Yeah, so that's a very challenging question about challenges, because it's all about challenges when it comes to, taking or first basically, releasing something like Zephyr or starting a project like that, which was, like, as Maureen said, 5 years ago with NXP, with Intel, Synopsys, and a few other, and the Linux Foundation, and try basically to do it the right way. Yeah. And at the same time, I mean, here you are trying basically to satisfy two walls. One is the community, your competitors in this case, or your fellow, leaders in the industry, and then also trying to do that inside the company you are working in, and try to sell the same thing also internally. So the open source story obviously was key And the other thing is being, not tied to any specific vendor, and that's really a selling point, because now at Intel, but also I would guess, just like Keith mentioned, and probably others as well. I mean, if you come with your own solution and you try to sell it to your customers, that's basically tying them into one single solution that, might not be helpful if they move on or if they want to do something different. So finding a solution that is open, which allows you to innovate, never mind which customer you are working with, is key. And this is something that a lot of our customers, a lot of our partners are asking for, right? Nobody wants to do something that is specific to certain hardware environment or certain architecture. And that something that we needed to convince people inside Intel, but also outside Intel, to move to this type of, write the application once and be able to run it on any architecture, any SoC, by just changing a minimal set of configuration. That's exactly what we are doing in the Zephyr project. You write, obviously that's a case-by-case basis, but to the most part, a lot of the code that we write is completely portable, with the main difference being the hardware itself. So when you are writing a Bluetooth application, when you are writing a network application, a sensor application, in Zephyr, it is designed to run on any hardware. And we whenever we design features, even for something that we require inside Intel to on a specific architecture, we do that with portability in mind. Yeah. So very good example is, for example, user space, which was done on one architecture first, but then it was moved onto multiple architectures, and now it allows you to write user space applications on basically almost all architectures that we have in Zephyr. So there are a lot of challenges there, and we had a lot of challenges, and now people are seeing the advantage. People can just go grab something that has been written, like, by another vendor for another solution completely, and just use it without actually having to worry about the portability layers. It will just work on Zephyr, and that actually was really a very selling point, and helped us avoid all of these challenges that people will have with a project like that. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Anas. Are there any other challenges people would like to cover? Michael, I see you lighting up.
Yeah, if I may build upon what Anas just said, because it's, I think all coins have two sides in a sense, and definitely this portability aspect, the neutral governance of the things we've been mentioning, is the key thing that got us to actually work with Zephyr in the first place many years ago. And we'd always believed in this kind of approach, and we've been kind of trying to evangelize people around the importance of this. And very often, of course, if you even get people to commit and say, okay, let's do Zephyr, let's try it out. The one challenge that you then meet is that suddenly you're in an ecosystem where, in order to contribute code, you have to make it portable. You have to make it reusable. You have to kind of care about its quality. You have to convince other people that your code is good and it can be included in Zephyr. And that can sometimes be a surprise, because people might be used to building each their own vendor locked in source tree that's potentially, not really very good quality, but nobody cares because it's only being used in one company and its customers who don't have anything to say. And suddenly you're in this community where all of these things start to matter, and there is a little bit of a shock perhaps to be had at first, but of course this is all meant to enable this ease of use and portability that Anas just spoke about, and that in turn results in a really incredible momentum you can build, because you can rely on Zephyr working more or less the same on each and every platform. You can generate firmwares with ease by just changing, one little variable in your command line. And we've been using it a lot as this kind of neutral ground for communication with different kinds of customers and groups within our customer companies. We have a simulator, Renode, that's meant to target different kinds of platforms and make it easier for people to develop software. But our challenge in demonstrating it has always been, how do we find software that we can demonstrate with? And suddenly there's Zephyr, where you can just kind of very easily generate lots and lots of demo software, because it's all very similar platform to platform. And you find it much easier talking to customers, because I remember a few years ago when we'd say Zephyr, people would be like, what is this, right? And now when we talk to people about Zephyr, they're more, of course, not all of them are using Zephyr yet, right? There's still a lot of work to be done, but it's no longer like, what is this? But rather people explaining themselves why they didn't adopt it yet, and kind of explaining that it's a process, that they still have to convince their management, but they're already in this position where they'd really like to do that. They still need to just kind of find their place and their way around this new way of doing things. But they're already on the right track. So that's an incredible change. So the challenge that was there before with, brand recognition and the knowledgeability of people around Zephyr suddenly disappeared. Like, everyone knows what Zephyr is. Now it's a matter of pushing people past this hump and getting them to use it.
Right.
Awesome, Michael. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to now reach out, Robin, and can you give me a question from the audience?
We don't have any specific questions yet,
no.
so if you guys can add some to the chat, that'd be helpful.
Awesome. Okay, no worries, Robin. I have more content to feed to the panel.
Amy, there is one comment on participation, though. Someone reached out and asked about the number of participants. And Kate responded, it looks like around 700 people have participated. So I think that's good to note.
Absolutely. Thank you, Robin. Okay, Carlos, I'm going to call on you next. So Carlos, now you've heard a little bit about the challenges, Anna's covered, Michael covered. What would you say are some of the recommended mitigation strategies for these challenges, either what you've faced at Nordic or what you've seen at the open source project?
So in general, for the challenges identified so far and some others that I would add to, like, for example, the enormous complexity issue that a first-time user to an open source operating system like Zephyr faces when compared to some vendor SDKs out there that are, well, because of their limited nature, perhaps in functionality, their limited scope in terms of hardware support, and so on, they are just simpler. And that's normal because they cover less ground than Zephyr. So for that complexity, for all the challenges that we have ahead, I think the best way to cover that gap is, what has been repeated over and over in all open source projects, but best, I think, is worthwhile repeating once more, is work upstream. So if you try to solve your problems for your customers that are using Zephyr, when they're already developing that product, it's probably too late. You're going to have to modify a lot of the source code, find ad hoc solutions for each one of them, and so on and so on. If you do, however, try to solve the problems at the root, at the source, immediately when something is being developed or conceived or discussed, that is the way. That is something that I've said internally, that I've said in multiple talks, and I think it's a very well-known fact that it's the only way that ensures you that whatever you get in the end is reliable without a huge amount of effort on your side, adapting, fixing, patching source code that's already out there. So source code that's common for everybody. So working upstream, working together with other companies, being aware at all times of what's being developed, and shaping it in ways, that's what everybody does here. And I think that's the best way to mitigate all of those challenges, working together in a single code base that we all share and that we adapt and we mold so that it's usable, practical, and useful to everybody.
Indeed.
Awesome, Carlos. Thank you. Are there any other mitigation strategies that people would recommend for the challenges that we've covered?
Well, I want to talk about one other challenge people might face if they have an existing code base. This is where Google was coming from with some existing firmware that we need to get running under Zephyr. We can't lose any functionality and features as we move over to Zephyr. So what we did to help out that migration was we were able to create shim layers to basically translate our application code over to the Zephyr driver APIs. And it was actually a pretty easy process for us to do that. We were able to do that very kind of piece by piece. And as we move forward, we're planning to basically convert our application over to native Zephyr API calls, but we didn't need to do that right now, right? We were able to use this shim layer and actually support both code bases. Our existing firmware code built as is on our own homegrown OS and under Zephyr, and support both code bases on multiple platforms at the same time. So that worked out very well for us.
That's fantastic, Keith, and it's great to hear, and it's a great real life example. So thank you. Any other strategies that people have employed they'd like to share?
I'll kind of tack on to what Carlos said about really emphasizing upstreaming wherever we can. One of the challenges that we've had at NXP is that we have a pretty large portfolio of microcontrollers, right? And when we have dozens, if not hundreds or more of different part numbers, it's difficult when it's a relatively new, relatively young project. I mean, we're 5 years in, but there's still just a lot of parts to cover. And so, it wasn't really feasible for us to say, okay, well, we're going to go and port Zephyr to every single chip that we're currently manufacturing, right? We just didn't have enough resources to do that. And so, what we did when the approach that we took when it came to porting Zephyr was to make sure that if somebody in the community was interested in porting something that we weren't actively working on at NXP, was that they would be enabled to do that. So for example, we took the MCU Expresso SDK HAL and built on top of that. And I was very careful to make sure that I was using things that were publicly available. So, any work that I was doing for one particular chip, if somebody was interested in a derivative chip that we weren't working on yet or hadn't got to yet or something like that, they could go and follow the same process, right? There was no magic under the hood that I was doing, that I had access to stuff internally at NXP that somebody externally didn't have access to. And so that kind of ties into, the emphasis on transparency, working in the upstream, minimizing our technical debt with respect to, having things out of tree, out downstream, things like that.
Thank you, Maureen. That's just a fantastic example. And I just love how it talks to the true scaling ability as we're looking at the commercialization using Zephyr. So thank you. Okay, Mazen, I'm going to call on you next, both you and Keith. So you and Keith have a unique joint technology area where you're both working on embedded controller technology. So for both you and Keith, can you talk to the embedded controller role using Zephyr in personal computing designs?
Sure. Yeah, the embedded controller on the PC is unique. And there's a lot of embedded systems out there, but on the PC, we're trying to balance the ability for an OEM to keep their customization, which might be private, and they would like it to remain private. And with Zephyr, it really is an exciting opportunity to have the sandbox where we can build, we're a building block supplier to the OEMs and the ODMs. And the EC is a co-traveler with us, and we need that piece. We can't build a system without an EC. So that's what Zephyr affords us. And specifically for real-time expertise, I don't want to learn how to do RTOS design. I don't want to have to deal with that. You know, I could defer to your team. I could defer to Anas. So then I can focus on what makes the PC a good PC, whether it's power management, you know, intelligent thermal management, fan control, all this goodness that our customers will see. So that's the great opportunity that Zephyr gives us, and I'm very excited to be, you know, using it.
Awesome, Mazen, thank you. And Keith, can you explain your experience at Google?
Yeah, I think you know, one thing we're getting out of Zephyr that we didn't have with our own homegrown OS is the very rich configuration framework with kconfig and device tree that's provided. And for us, this is really important because we rely on the manufacturers, the ODMs and OEMs, to actually make a lot of modifications to the EC code base. And the structured configuration available under Zephyr is going to be a much easier process and on a much lower learning curve than our existing process. You know, and as people have probably seen over the past year, the number of notebook sales has absolutely exploded. And there's just no way for Google on our own to support every single Chromebook variant out there, right? We need our partners to have that ability to modify the code themselves and put out a quality product that's going to meet, you know, all our power requirements and all the other qualification that we need to do. You know, and on the embedded controller side, you know, one thing Google is hoping that we want to bring upstream into Zephyr is we have a very full-featured USB power delivery stack that manages all aspects of your USB-C connection. So this is not something that's in Zephyr now. Our stack is going to be 100% compliant with all the power delivery tests. So that's something we're excited that we're going to be able to bring to the table to Zephyr.
Nice.
That's just phenomenal, Keith. And again, it just shows the amazing ability of this technology to scale and build upon each area. Mazen, do you have anything else you'd like to add to that?
Just that you know, I want to reiterate that for our ODM partners and OEMs, they don't have to, you know, reinvent the wheel and you know, create custom firmware for everything. In fact, they can preserve their IP and adopt Zephyr and still produce excellent PCs for our users. It's a great shortcut in a way, and they should leverage it. It's out there. And the license in of itself is amazing because you don't have to give any of the stuff back if you don't want to. It's a great sandbox, like I said.
Fantastic. Is there anyone else on the panel that would like to comment on this topic around the embedded controller? Okay, fantastic. Okay, Robin, I'm gonna go back to you and see have you gotten any questions?
Yeah, we have a couple.
Awesome.
I'll start with this one. How well is Zephyr accepted in your companies, the companies who are the major force in the project, as
That's
well
for you,
as
Amy.
and how likely is it that your companies will continue investing into Zephyr? As an example, I'm wondering about the efforts NXP puts into supporting upcoming MCUs in Zephyr as quickly as possible. So that's a two-part question.
Thank you, Robin, and that's a fantastic question. And to Mazen's point, I could personally speak about this on end, but since the question asker specifically referenced NXP, I'll let Maureen start.
Oh, I didn't catch that. I guess it does reference NXP directly. Okay, I only saw the first two lines of the question. So I'd say that, you know, our business line has been involved in Zephyr since the beginning. And so, you know, there's a lot of support within the, you know, our microcontroller line. But I think, you know, as this project has grown, especially over the last year, we have seen a lot of increasing interest in the other business lines within the company. I think we're still leading the way, but I'm really encouraged to see where things are going in the future.
Awesome, Maureen. Honest, do you want to comment about Intel's experience?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the acceptance of Zephyr, I mean, this is like obviously a long story. When the whole thing started, it started like as a project to support like a limited set of products that Intel had at the time. And since then, actually, it evolved into something larger than that. I remember, since we have Mazen here, I remember I first talked with Mazen 3 or 4 years ago. We were looking, they were looking at a new software environment, etc., etc. And we thought they had free RTOS, and at the time, and you know, basically, I mean, people have solutions, yeah. Not necessarily the best solution there, but people have solutions, and sometimes people want to stick with what they have because they are familiar with the environment, they are familiar with the software, that it works, right? Maybe it's not ideal, but nobody has time to go and move to something completely different, and that's like one of the major challenges. But being persistent and being, you know, also vocal and doing and using the Zephyr project and the collaboration that we have on the project, and also innovating in different areas where, you know, things like device tree, things like config, and a few other things, that like having a common API for drivers, and also using some of the, you know, good stuff from Linux, because a lot of us were Linux developers before Zephyr, helped a lot, you know, give people, you know, at least some confidence, some level of confidence that, you know, there is something to it. Yeah? And over time, this has evolved, and people have identified that this is not just like, you know, a small project running inside Intel. This is, we have NXP, we have Synopsys, we have Google now, Facebook, etc., etc. And people start also asking for Zephyr, right? I mean, some people started coming to different groups inside Intel and telling, we want to use Zephyr, yeah, and without even realizing that the Zephyr project, I mean, that Intel itself is actually a member of the Zephyr project, and that actually always fascinating when we see people start using Zephyr because they have seen that in a conference, or somebody was Googling and they found, you know, a reference to this new operating system, and they start using Zephyr and inside Intel, and then they realize that, you know, oh, Anas actually is like full-time working with Zephyr, and Amy has a team that covers Zephyr with, you know, with validation, with testing, with development, and this is like really fascinating. So I think initially that was a little bit tough, you know, to convince people to move from their existing environments. But as technology evolves and people start looking again for solution for the next generation hardware, they found Zephyr, and it becomes more and more automatic. And we are now at a stage where, you know, you don't have to think twice. Yeah, if you are doing anything inside Intel that would involve you know, a microcontroller, never mind what architecture, yeah? And we do a lot. Yeah, I mean, probably we are the only company in the project that has high stakes in every architecture supported by the project. Yeah, whether it's ARM, whether it's RISC-V, whether it's NIOS, x86, obviously, Synopsys, ARC. So that's where people have now one solution that fits all, you know, different hardware complexities that might arise, and there's one address. You don't have to, you know, you don't have to go and reinvent the wheel because somebody decided to move from ARM to RISC-V or vice versa. Yeah, and this is what's great about it. Yeah.
Very good. And Amy, maybe you could say a word or two about Intel's commitment to putting Zephyr on other devices on the platform. You know, I know you could talk about Ice Age and.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Yes, I don't want to I don't want to take over the panel, but I would love to. Thank you, Mazen. Yeah. So at Intel, you know, to Anas's point, we have spent the last handful of years really evangelizing and partnering. Mazen was the beginning of it, but now, you know, Intel is uniting the firmware IPs onto Zephyr, you know, from audio to sensing to embedded controller. And it really, again, like with all of the millions of firmware teams at Intel, you have one sandbox, to Mazen's point, where they are unified. And then to Anas's point, you know, as these firmware IPs evolve, you know, they look at different architectures to build upon for different capabilities. And the fact that your RTOS or your scheduling capability or your real-time capability is able to flex with you is like, it's like
Amazing.
the money. That's like the money
Yeah.
sell, right?
Yeah.
And at least at Intel. And it has been my pleasure working with Anas and Mazen on this. And it does take persistence, right? To Anas's point, if anyone in the audience who is looking to either sell this in your company or to do something similar, you have got to be persistent on something that you believe in. Like this kind of vision on how you can unite an industry, you have to be persistent, because the technical debt, to Michael's point, and honestly to Anas's point, is everyone already has a solution. And it might not be an optimized solution, but you know, change is always difficult. And so you have got to be persistent and don't take no for an answer, right? You know, just be curious of why people say no, and also see how you can help them.
And the benefits will be there. I mean, so all the panel members said there's some growing pains indeed, but the benefits and the reuse that you're going to get is going to be really amazing, and it's worth the trouble to look into it and research it. Yeah.
Maybe Carlos can say more, because he has actually most of he's moving a mountain there. Yeah, so
Carlos, go for it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I have to say that I had sort of my work cut out for me, because when trying to convince and push Zephyr within Nordic at the very beginning, 4 or 5 years ago, I would always use other industries that came before as an example. It's like, you know, there's no reason why microcontrollers would be different than, say, servers or mobile phones, right? Those went to open source solutions for the most part, because the software complexity grew too much and it wasn't worth it, right? It wasn't worth developing 10 times the very same thing with various degrees of success when you could be sharing that effort and then focusing on whatever you think gives value to your particular customers, or trying to find value, actually, because writing the same module 10 times is not value to your customer. That certainly is not. So maybe instead of wasting time re-implementing things, then you try to implement something new that you can put on top of the fundamentals of the basics, right? And that was the main selling point for me. So it's we will be able to spend time focusing on things that actually matter. Maybe a new radio feature in the case of Nordic, instead of developing yet another file system, you know. And we don't make file systems. We make chips to communicate with other chips. File systems have to be there, but they're not our selling point. So, you know, or kernels by that matter, you know. So,
I love the hashtag Zephyr persistence here in the chat. So to the point of persistence, of course, it's an interesting perspective from a silicon vendor's point of view, because you have some kind of a critical mass that can kind of definitely show the benefit of you know, the momentum behind using one single operating system for all your chips, and perhaps sharing some of those subsystems with other vendors and so on. It's definitely still a difficult selling point because of legacy and because people like what they had before, but at least there is some kind of strength in numbers there. We have exposure to a lot of customers who are very typically they're building one product, right? Some of them might be building, of course, a portfolio of different products, and then this kind of story makes a lot of sense. But many of them are just interested in like building their next gen product, and speed is of the essence, and the legacy aspect of things is typically very, very difficult to overcome. And of course, the persistence also means that sometimes, yes, you have to learn why they don't want to use Zephyr yet, and you have to look for the right moment to use it. And that moment typically comes with new projects, with some kind of niche or innovative applications that people want to enable, where you can really offer some value with Zephyr doing things that other operating systems don't do. And I think that the persistence needs to be, shown on many fronts, and it's incredible how far along we've come, right? Because we're nearing, I think, 1,000 contributors, right? We're nearing like all of the numbers for Zephyr are now are really exploding. So it seems like it's already paying off, but that doesn't we can rest on our laurels. I guess we should be looking at Linux as an example of what you can achieve if you persist long enough and going forward like this.
Yeah, I think actually that this conference has shown actually some of the maturity we have reached, right? Obviously, I mean, I would have liked to have this conference face to face, but we all know, right? I mean, I was thinking about it earlier. So yesterday we had like a couple of presentations that have shown some technologies that I wish I had like 5 years ago. Yeah, today as well. For example, the one from Percebio with the tracer. Today, earlier today, there was something else from Minfold with debugging and doing remote debugging and post-mortem and so on. These are like cool features that just shows you first. I mean, most of these things are not directly done by us. There are actually people asking for these features from certain vendors, and these vendors actually are now somehow forced to go and implement or support Zephyr in their applications, in their tools, to satisfy their customers. Me and Kate don't have to go run from booth to booth like we used to do 3 or 4 years ago, in embedded world, trying to convince still people about Zephyr. Now they are coming to us. They are adding the support in their own, and this is really great. Yeah, this is where we should all be proud that we have reached a certain stage where it's not yet smooth sailing. There is a lot of scalability issues that we have to deal with, obviously, but it is comforting, to know that I don't have to worry about these things. People will actually add the support. People start making money out of Zephyr, right? As vendors, whether it's support. And this is, by the way, I was there when all of this was happening with Linux. When all of these small companies started, bobbing out, and we are doing Linux support, we are selling Linux services. And I see the same thing right now, 20 years after all of that happened with Linux, or a little bit more. This is happening with Zephyr. I still remember the headline, Oracle supports Linux, right? I mean, this was like huge, right? And we are getting there right now with Zephyr as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah.
Awesome, Honest. Thank you. Okay, so I want to try to get another question from the audience. We have about 10 more minutes. So Robin, do you have another question?
Yeah, I have a comment, and there are a few questions left, but the one comment, the last one on here, I think is interesting. It says last week at the Yocto Virtual Summit, they found the talk, How to Make a Case for Using Yocto Project to Your Executive Leadership. Excellent and fun, which also applies to Zephyr. So that's something interesting to leverage.
I might do that next time.
Yeah. So one of the questions is there a timeline for USB PD support?
Yeah, so, Google, right, our first priority is, right, we need to get Zephyr actually onto a Chromebook. So that's going to take us kind of to the end of the year. But then upstreaming that USB power delivery stack and our EC application is going to be starting basically early next year. So we're looking 2022 timeframe to get that in. But I'll reiterate that this is a very mature stack. So once we've kind of massaged it and made it fit better into the Zephyr framework, is going to be a very well-tested and mature framework that's going into the code base.
Hey, Keith,
Awesome, Keith.
a follow-up question similar to that. What about the sensing stack that you guys have in Chrome and at Google? Is that something you think would fit Zephyr? Yeah.
So we're actually exploring right now adding the Android sensor framework into Zephyr instead of the Chromebook one. The Chromebook sensor framework is very integrated to Chromebooks and kind of solves the sensor needs of laptops very specifically. The Android sensor framework is a little more general. It provides some capabilities and features that we don't have. This capability of nano apps is one thing. So there's things like on-body detection, drop detection, those kind of features kind of come along for free with the Android sensor framework. So we're going to do some experiments with that to see if that can come in. And the Android team is excited about the possibility of this getting provided into Zephyr.
That's great. Thank you.
Keith, I have to say it just because everyone saw my two twin boys getting ready for school a few minutes ago behind me. And so I have twin 10-year-old boys, and you know, in the last year, Chromebooks have become like the mainstay for them. And they have heard me talk about Zephyr in Chromebooks for a year now. So, I mean, we have sold the second generation, don't worry.
Right.
Okay, Robin, we probably have one more time for one more question from the audience.
Good. We only have one left. So
Okay, perfect.
Vulnerabilities are discovered after products are released. Do you notify your customers directly about vulnerabilities, or do you encourage them to register at the Zephyr Project Vulnerability Registry?
I can answer from
Carlos,
the Nordics perspective. We have a security expert at Nordic that then, based on the sort of on the contract level we have with each particular customer, we notify them individually directly. That is regardless of whether the vulnerability was discovered in Zephyr or it was discovered instead elsewhere, like for example in the Bluetooth spec itself. For example, sometimes vulnerabilities are discovered in a specification, so then that needs to be fixed in software and of course reported also to the projects that implemented like Zephyr. So we do that directly. We, however, work with Zephyr in the security project for that knowledge sharing. So every time something is reported to us, we forward that to the Zephyr security team and vice versa, of course. Any vulnerabilities that we get informed of, we then transfer to our internal security database and inform our customers and provide fixes for.
Awesome, Carlos. Can someone from the panel talk a little bit about how the security infrastructure is set up here at the Zephyr project? That might be a little bit nice to touch on here at the end. I'm going to call on Maureen.
So I didn't quite follow what it was you wanted me to explain.
I just wanted you to explain the way that the security infrastructure is set up and the process that we use on receiving vulnerabilities and then distributing the fix.
Yeah, so we have a dedicated PCERT team, and Kate, jump in if I misrepresenting something here. And so we have a team of folks that consists of representatives from the member companies that constitute the security committee within the project. And so they monitor incoming reports that come in. We've started using GitHub has a feature to report security vulnerabilities and maintain an embargo. And fix those vulnerabilities under the embargo. And then, you know, as Kate noted in the question, you know, there's a vulnerability registry available that the security committee will send notifications to when those come out of embargo. Let's see what else. The security team also manages creating it's a numbering authority, so they can generate CVE numbers. Did I miss anything, Kate?
Can you reference, Maureen, the study that was done last year?
Yes, I don't have a link to that handy, but there was a pretty lengthy study that reported, I don't know what the total number of vulnerabilities they found were, but they worked with the security team to confirm or investigate those vulnerabilities. It sort of fleshed out the process of how we put things under embargo, how we notify product makers. We actually wound up extending the embargo just a little bit to account for time, both for the Zephyr community to fix vulnerabilities, and then some additional time for downstream to also address those vulnerabilities before they come out of embargo. I don't have a link, like I said, I don't have a link to that quite handy offhand.
I'm sure Kate has. I'll have her.
Martin, it's already in chat. Yeah.
Ah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. No, the question was sort of more along the lines of, getting the word out, I guess, for people. So it sounds like each of the companies that has Silicon right now is enabling and telling them directly. I'm just sort of wondering, though, for product makers that do not have an existing relationship, like, a couple of steps down and things like that, how we can get the word to them that they can be notified. So.
Awesome, Mazen, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that one of the nicest things about this is, every time, especially for the OEMs and ODMs that are considering adopting Zephyr, is if you're taking a long-term release, you can rest assured that this has gone through a lot of security analysis. We have experts doing this. You don't have to get your engineers become, security savvy to concentrate on your product. So you can take that long-term release and know that it's going to be supported and it's been tested. Now, if you have any security concerns, you can look at the other pieces, not the kernel itself. So that's a great plus, and you can take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Awesome, Mazen. Okay, any last comments? I'm going to have Kate flash up the survey again. And is there anything else that anyone would like to comment? Or Robin, did you get any last questions?
No, that was it. No more
Okay,
questions.
awesome. Anything else anyone would like to say in the last couple minutes?
I just want to thank contributors in general, especially those that have pushed also Zephyr within their companies, convinced their management to use it, because without people that start driving the way forward, and that counts for all types. There's people sending patches, people convincing other people using Zephyr and talking about it or tweeting about it. But that helps a lot. It helps spread the word, and that that in turn makes it easier for the next person to convince another person to use Zephyr, try it out, improve it, and so on. So everybody who has contributed so far and in the future is just and it's honestly, for me, it's the most rewarding thing of working on open source, just seeing those people making to want to make something better for everyone, and that really is different than in some ways at least than proprietary software.
Very nice.
Yeah, and Carlos, I completely agree with you. And just to put it out there, like anyone who ever would need someone like myself as an advocate to bring to your company, come to your company and talk about the benefits that we have found at a place like Intel, I mean, I would be more than willing, and be my pleasure to do that. So this technology is just really great, and what we are doing and uniting this ecosystem is just really a heartwarming experience. So. Okay,
Indeed.
Kate, can you put up the survey again so people can know to fill it out? And so thank you everyone for attending. Please, again, because this is the first Zephyr Summit that Zephyr Project Summit, Developer Summit, and we will repeat next year, but we want to learn from what we have done this year. So please fill out the survey, and all of the slides are probably already available, and then the videos can be watched on YouTube. I'm going to make my children watch every single one of these on on their Chromebooks. We'll be there very soon. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, panelists. This has been just a great experience this morning, and thank you, everyone, for your participation in this summit.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Amy.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.